There are four things I want to do on the front end of this 1981 Kawasaki CSR 650 up here in the control. I want to change the bearings in the steering column. These are probably original, which means they're ball bearing style. I got a new set of roller bearings that came with the bike, so I'm going to change those out. I'm also going to replace the oil seals in the front forks. I've got oil coming out of both sides, so those are shot. They need to be replaced. The other thing I'm going to do is go through the front brake. I'm going to bleed it. I'm going to completely go through that front caliper, clean it up, make sure that everything looks good in there. And I'm also going to check the wheel bearings on the front axle, right and left side. Once I get all four of those things taken care of, I'll feel good about putting this bike on the road. So let's get started. Today I'm going to start on another project on this Kawasaki CSR 650. This project is changing the oil seals on the front forks. As we move these dust seals, you could see right in here I've got a fluid leak. So changing these oil seals is a necessity on this front end. According to the manual, the front suspension is a spring-controlled, hydraulically dampened telescopic fork, which in layman's terms means that in that upper tube there's a long spring, and at the very top of this there's an air valve. That spring and the lower fork assembly are held in place by a damper rod that runs down in that lower portion. To remove this, there are a couple of things we need to do. First off, we're going to release the air, and we're going to do a couple of steps while the forks are still on the bike. The triple clamps on the steering column are the best clamps and vise you can find for this type of a project. After releasing the air in the forks, the next thing I need to do is remove or loosen this Allen head bolt. When I do that, the fluid is going to come out of this fork. Another way to drain the fluid out of the forks, if you're not doing a full disassembly and you're just changing the fluid, is you can pull these two Phillips screws, one on each fork. This Allen head bolt has got Loctite on it, and in my experience this requires an impact driver, and it's not something you want to sneak up on. You want to really get after it. You'll see that before I do this, I've put the axle back in just to hold those forks straight. Nothing's tight, it's just going to keep that fork from twisting. That is not the normal color of fork oil. The next thing we want to do while the forks are still on the bike is loosen this cap. We don't want to remove it because there's a spring in there, it's under pressure, and right now there's a little too much stuff in the way. If the top of your upper fork tube sits above this triple clamp, you don't necessarily have to loosen this top pinch bolt, but just to be safe, that's what I'm going to do. I don't have a wrench that fits that top cap here, so I'm just going to use an adjustable wrench and place a towel on there so that I don't mar it up. Again, all I'm doing here is just loosening this. Then I'll take it to the vise Ooh, maybe. That's going to be a tough one. To break this cap loose, I've cheated a little bit. I loosened that lower pinch bolt and I actually rotated the fork until I could get to the back side of this fitting so I wasn't buggering up this valve. Then I tightened up that pinch bolt, and now I can go back to trying to get this thing to loosen up. As you can see, I've also turned the handlebars so that it's pushing against the frame and I can get maximum torque. It's still going to be tight, but at least I got a few things going for me. Okay, that's all we needed. I also did that to the other side, rotated that fork, so that one should come off as well. Now that I've got the caps loose up here, all I need to do is loosen this pinch bolt. Make sure you hold on to the fork, otherwise it's going to come sliding out of there. And then I'm going to take it to the bench and finish dismantling it and servicing it. Now I'm only going to do one fork at a time, so that if I have an issue or forget how things go back together, I've got another one as a reference. I also have a manual in my case, but I still like to do just one at a time. Now that we're at the bench, I'm going to remove this clip that's in here that's holding this original oil seal in place. Should just be able to get in here and find the end and then just slowly start working it out. There we go. Then we're going to move on to the cap. This is a really fine thread, so you want to be careful with this. If this is built as I expect it, there's going to be an O-ring that sits in here and then threads on the other end. So I'm just going to get this loose enough where I can turn it by hand, and then I'm going to put some pressure on it as I continue to loosen it so that that thing doesn't come popping out and smack you in the face. It seems like it's a little tight. You can bring it all the way out with your wrench. Again, just pushing on here. So now all you're really seeing is my hand in the way. Okay, now it's starting to turn by hand. I can see the O-ring that's in there, and the end of the threads won't be too far behind. Okay. I actually have very little to no pressure from that spring. So there's the cap. Then, according to the manual, we have a spacer, and as I pull these things out, I'm going to clean them and I'm going to look for wear and tear on them. I'm also going to make sure that if there's an orientation to them, that I get them back in the right way. So this spacer looks universal or ambidextrous, so that can go back in. In here there's a spring. If I push up on the bottom of the fork, I can start moving this out. Here comes the spring, and here's what they call the spring seat. And next we're going to have a spring coming out of here. Sometimes these will have varying coils, and as I pull this out, this is coiled real tightly at the top, then the loose coils are toward the bottom. So I want to make sure that I get this oriented correctly. So there's going to be the bottom, and as we go through here you can see that the coils get tighter towards the top. So I want to make sure we get that back in the right way. Last but not least, there should be a damper rod inside of there. I'm going to have to move you around a little bit. Now I'm just going to try and remove the upper tube from the lower tube. And as I get towards the bottom here, there may be a little resistance depending on the design, but that one came right off, which is good. I didn't want to fight that. So in here, this is the old oil seal. That's where the new one will go. Just need to pry that out. On the bottom of this is a threaded section that holds that damper rod in place. So that's going to sit like so. And the threads are actually in the end of this damper rod, but this has to be taped so that the taper is facing up. Now I should just be able to dump this upper tube and that damper rod should come right out. As it comes out, I have a spring on there, and that's about it. So this is all disassembled. Now it's just a matter of getting parts cleaned up, then I can start reassembling it. As you clean this up and continue the disassembly, keep an eye open for a crush washer that lives right here. This is where the hex bolt goes into the bottom of the fork. You're probably going to want to replace that. Sometimes you can reuse those, but I don't always recommend it. Just look at the condition of it and go from there. I've got most of the parts cleaned, and now we're just going to get rid of this old oil seal and put the new one in. I know I'm not going to try and salvage this. It's pretty much junk. I'm just concerned about the fork tube itself. So we're just going to try and get in here and hook this and see if we can't just get it to come on out. Work our way around here. I suspect that this is an original seal, and so it's gonna put up a little fight here. I'm really just hoping that this isn't so old that it's got a metal band that has corroded to the tube here. I've seen that before. That was a disaster. So I was able to get this special tool I built. This is just a bent screwdriver underneath there, and put it underneath that seal and just drive it out. There we go. It was bad, but not as bad as it could have been. Now I can just clean this out and we're actually ready to put the new seal right back in its place.